I count it a pleasure to be here with you today. Avue Technologies Corporation has been around for quite some time, and one of the unique things about the company is that it was founded specifically to address the human resources needs of federal agencies. So all of the automation that we have in the company was created for that purpose. So within our suite of services, we have a lot of things that deal with employee and labor relations. We have a Douglas Factor apps, for example. We have an e-learning system. All of that is in the system. So when Todd and I were kicking around topics for me to address in terms of the interest of the group and of course in keeping with what's going on, we settled on the topic, improving employee morale through positivity. So let's see, there must be a clicker somewhere. I have this thing here.
There is an email as well.
Okay. All right, now which one is the move thing? Okay, that's what I clicked. Where am I supposed to be pointing it?
There.
Okay, good. All right, so I thought I would start off by talking about morale. We always talk about morale. Oh, the morale is low. Oh my God, we all talk about morale, but what is morale? And by the way, you have a handout. You may have some of this stuff in your handout, but it's not going to be in the order that I'm presenting it. So don't get hung up on what you're seeing on that piece of paper. I'll just tell you that now. So when we start talking about morale and what that actually means, we're talking about the employees.
Sorry, interrupt you real quick, I'm sorry.
Okay.
There were handouts at the end of the table, so if you don't have one in your hand, if you saw one at the end of the table, if you please pass them down. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, Todd. It's the employee's outlook. It's, are they optimistic? Their self-concept, the belief in themselves in terms of how they fit within the organization. When we talk about the organization's mission, goals, activities, the vision, all that kind of stuff, all that terminology you've heard, how does the employee relate to that? Have they actually, I'll use the word, enculturated that into their behavior at work? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about morale. And so the objective, of course, is to achieve positive employee morale. We want it to be a positive relationship. And so as we talk about what are the benefits, why does it even matter? Why do we even care what an employee's morale is like? Because after all, they own it. I mean, as managers, are we supposed to go in and worry about what a person's morale is, or should our focus be on accomplishing the mission? Well, no presentation is any good unless we try to throw out some kind of a statistic or to back up what we say by a study. So the fact is, the studies show that when there is high morale in the workplace, the engagement is higher for the employee, number one. They're engaged. And so why do we want engagement? Because engagement leads to higher productivity and the accomplishment of the mission. So if an employee is engaged, they're fully involved, they're enthusiastic, and the way that they work furthers the organization's ability to achieve its mission. So that's what that's all about. The employee's engagement influences their ability to even just say, I want to learn, I want to know, I want to stay abreast of what's going on in the organization itself. Now, how do you know whether or not an employee is engaged? Well, a good indicator of how they're engaged is a term that we call discretionary energy. And I don't know if you've heard that term before, but discretionary energy. There's the idea that when you have an employee, they are paid to do certain things. And the bottom line is most of them will focus on doing those certain things. But how do they take then that above and beyond what the immediate expectations are within the organization? So if you have this excess energy, if the employee has this excess energy, what are they doing with it? Are they looking for more work? Are they helping their coworkers? Are they contributing ideas and participating maybe in committees that are looking out for the future of the organization? But the idea is that that discretionary energy is what you want to capture. And that is demonstrated by the amount of the engagement. Okay? So I want you to think about that concept. I don't think as managers we spend a whole lot of time actually focusing on that. Oftentimes we're looking at the bottom line, is the work getting done? But in today's times, you know, there's the issue of reduced resources and all these other things that are happening. So, okay, so employee morale, you know, we look at some of the characteristics of how we would actually know whether an employee's morale is okay or not. Some employees are very verbal about letting you know when they have issues, and your attitude may be, I wish they would go away. Because sometimes you get into this rut where you have what I call the constant complainers in the organization. And, you know, in some cases, they are a nuisance. You know, I've been there, done that. And, you know, my biggest joy was when that person would say, I'm going to find a job somewhere else. And I would think, yay, let me help you. I might even make some calls on your behalf. Well, you got that working. But sometimes those people are the ones that may very well be giving you an indication of what might be going on in the work unit as a whole. There might be that undercurrent that's there that might need to be addressed. So when we talk about ways then as a manager that you can boost an employee's morale, the first thing is, and I think you all can attest to this, everybody wants to be part of the in crowd. There's nothing worse than having things happen within your organization and you're the last one to know. As managers, it's important that you learn to congratulate your staff for things that happen. And I'm talking about life events. And I know sometimes there's this need or this feeling that you need to do a lot of separation between what goes on at work and then what goes on in a person's personal life. But the fact is they're all blended. It's all one. And the bottom line is you need to accept that. I remember once, even within Avue, and we're a fairly small company, and I was on a conference call with another of the vice presidents and one of her employees, and we were trying to get a White House page together. And in the middle of us talking about what we wanted on the page, this employee said, oh, there's some things going on with me, and you really need to know about it because it may impact my ability to get this thing done. And her boss was the other person on the call with me, and she was like, well, let's just deal with that later. We got to get this page built. And I understand that, and I'm not sure where it would have been appropriate to find out, you know, what was going on with this employee. But the bottom line is that you have to engage on all levels to some extent. So if that doesn't make you comfortable, you know, I would say just approach that a little at a time. You know, maybe deal with the marriages and the baby showers and that kind of thing. And then eventually, as the trust builds and the relationships build, you will find yourself getting more involved in other areas too. But that kind of thing contributes to employee morale. So now when we talk about what contributes to the low morale, just a quick list of things that you need to be cognizant of. Now we talk so much these days about sequestration, and that's the buzzword of the day. And you know, that concept itself doesn't really mean anything to anybody, but what does concern people is, what is the impact? Cost of living increases. I guess they haven't been around for a couple of years now. Promotion opportunities as organizations downsize. Maybe that promotion you were looking forward to at some point in the future, maybe that job isn't there any longer. So that affects a person's morale. As you lose resources, you may find that you have to give people a little bit more work. And if you're not able to up the compensation, that has an impact on them. Sometimes the awards budget is one of the first things that's cut when finances get low or if they're tight. And so now all of a sudden you're saying thank you, but there might not be any money associated with it. And we know money is not the big motivator, but for some people that is a tremendous deal. That might be one of the few ways in government. I mean, we limit so much how we can recognize people, that to have an impact along those lines is significant. And then the entire uncertainty about the future itself when it comes to federal employment. As we get new leadership at the top, people have new ideas. Everybody wants to reorganize. Everybody wants to restructure. There's all of these things kicking around, and it leads to that sense of low morale. In January of just this year, January 2013, Federal News Radio conducted an anonymous online survey on federal morale, and it asked managers and employees what were the morale levels like in their office. And there was like 2,880 people in the survey, and they said the morale level was low. And they said that the people in their offices' morale was even lower than theirs, okay, for whatever that means. And so when we talk about what they identified as the three top morale killers, they were the pay freeze, ineffective leadership, and Fed bashing from the public and Congress. And those findings were true of both managers as well as regular employees. There's a little bit of difference in that I think the managers may have had it skewed just a tiny bit, but they were the top three on both lists. So, that is what's going on right now in terms of the federal workforce. Okay, so 1/3 of federal employees responded by saying that their managers were currently doing nothing to build morale in their agencies. Nothing. 33% said they were doing nothing. Okay? So that means 1/3 of y'all in this room are just not dealing with it. And I think that may be a mistake going forward when we've already established that studies show that an engaged employee is going to be more productive, help you achieve your bottom line. And if a third of them are saying morale is low and you're not doing anything about it, I think there's room to kind of step up there. Okay. Let's see. One federal manager in the survey said that if my morale is low, it's pretty hard for me to have a positive impact on the morale of my employees, but at the same time, they recognize that they have to boost morale. Okay, they recognize that. All right, so as a manager, we know that some of this stuff you don't have control over. You can't do anything about sequestration. We know that. You can't do anything about the pay freezes. Oftentimes, your discretion in terms of how your workforce is structured may be somewhat out of your hands. But the important thing about that is that you have to make sure that you're focusing on those things that you do have control over. You can control the messaging to some extent, the information that's provided to the employees in your organization. You can certainly do that. The key is that, when we talk about people wanting to be part of the in crowd, they want to know what's happening. So that's very important. So we always say from a manager's perspective, when we talk about you gotta kind of protect your own morale in order to project positivity to your workers, is you need to kind of assess yourself and look at how am I coming to work? What's my attitude when I get there? That's very important. Nelson found this picture, and I hope it shows up well. And so, you know, you have to kind of look at yourself. How are you coming to work? Are you stressed out and grumpy? You got a frown on your face? You know, your body language is telling people, don't even bother me. You know, I don't want to hear it. Imagine if you were looking at somebody like that every day. You know, everybody has a bad day. But if this is the persona you're projecting, and I understand, I mean, you've got your stressors too. But this is an epitome, I think, of, and I've had managers like that, believe me. You know, in a 25-year federal career, I've had the good ones, I've had the bad ones, I had the ones that I said, well, if I have to come in there one more day. So, you know, I recognize that. I've had only one that was like this one portrayed here. But imagine what that could do to your motivation in terms of getting in there and walking on eggshells because you don't want to incur the wrath of somebody that's going through that kind of a day or has that kind of personality. And Nelson found this picture too. And so, you know, when you first arrive in the workforce, you need to be positive. You need to make sure that you're spending time with your staff every day. You know, believe it or not, it's a good feeling to an employee when a manager stops by their desk, even if they just say hello. It's a very good feeling. You know, I've worked a whole lot of years in a federal career and now with Avue. And when the CEO comes by my little cubicle and pulls up her chair, you know, that I kind of sit up and take notice of that. So that kind of thing, to know that that manager feels that you're important enough to spend a little bit of time with, you know. Now, I'm talking about half your day now. But, you know, but just a few minutes to let them know that you're aware of them and that you know what their contribution is to the organization. Smile. You know, keep a smile on your face. Walk tall, walk confidently, you know, greet people. Make sure they know what's important to you as far as the contribution of the work, what your expectations are. There's nothing worse than spending time doing stuff that doesn't amount to anything. Busy work, you know? And so make sure you're aware of those kinds of things. So you want to present yourself in a positive light too, because it is contagious. Your employees will definitely pick up on that. So what traits are you going to embody? You're going to make sure that you know your agency's mission and priorities. And, you know, some people say, oh, we get so hung up on that. And, you know, in the days gone by, we used to do these big exercises on, okay, here's the mission. All right, now everybody, every unit, you need to sit here and create your vision. And then you'd take that vision and then you'd create all these goals. And then you'd identify all the steps it's going to take to achieve those goals. And then somebody would say, well, let's put it in project management, you know. And so now everybody's in MS Project and they're plotting all that stuff out. I don't think we're doing that anymore. I sure hope we're not. But it is important that as managers that you know the bottom line, what is it you're accountable for accomplishing? And you need to be able to communicate that to your workers. And you need to explain to them how what they do is important to you all being able to achieve your goals. You need to know personally how you contribute to the organization. What are you bringing to the table? Can you articulate that? You know, it's one thing to say that I manage this unit, and so we're assuming you have good management skills, although in some cases we know that they take the super performing person and they make them the supervisor, and a lot of times they don't invest the time, and I'm speaking for some agencies that I've been in. The first unit that I led, you know, I was always known as a super performer, but I had never supervised. And they throw you in there, and boy, you know, the first performance appraisal I gave to a person, boy, she literally attacked me. Because I gave her like a highly successful instead of an outstanding, and apparently in her career she'd gotten outstandings all the time. And boy, I stood firm and made it through that, and then I went to my big supervisor's office, and he was on the phone, I never will forget that. And he was like motioning me to come in, and I came in and I sat in that chair and I just cried and cried and cried. And he was like, oh, what to do, what to do. He didn't know what to do. He was like running, finding tissue and everything. So, but, you know, I think back to that day. He had his assistant even call me that night. Steve wanted to know if you're okay. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm okay now, you know. But nobody prepared me for that. And, you know, it wasn't, I just wasn't expecting that kind of reaction to a performance appraisal that I thought was very good. And I thought it was very fair. But we don't prepare people to be supervisors. So at the same time, you still have to know what it is you're bringing to the organization. You have to recognize what your strengths and weaknesses are. And once you know them, do something about it. You know, a lot of times you work for people, and I know there are a lot of people with strong egos. I'm sure there's some of you in this room. And you say it's my way or the highway. And some of you can even pull it off. You can pull it off. But there's others of us that have to take a more introspective look, and we have to address where we see our weaknesses are. We have to be open enough to know what they are, and then take the steps to try to overcome and address them. So that's how we assess what is our real contribution to the organization. Communicate with your leadership. Even as a manager, you have somebody that you report to. And just like the employee wants to feel like they're part of your inner circle, you also need to feel like you're part of your leadership's inner circle as well. That you're including in what I used to call the big meetings, you know. Yeah, where the decisions are made and where you're getting the opportunity to hear it from a broad perspective. We talked a little bit about getting rid of the fluff, you know. There's nothing worse than busy work, and I'll just leave that at that. A can-do attitude, employee awareness, and again, we spoke about that, knowing what's going on with your employees, not just on the job, but also outside the workplace. All right, so, you know, as we look at, we talked a little bit about your arrival at work and, you know, the attitude, and you need to be careful about blame is an important concept there. Yeah, I like that. The gentleman there is pointing like this. That's really important, and it takes a strong manager, I think, to, if they mess up, it's easy to blame it on your employees. And, you know, you need to be careful about that, because it might very well be their fault. It might very well be their fault. But the idea is that you're accountable for it. I'm in a women's organization, the American Business Women's Association. I don't know how many of you have heard of that, ABWA. And our chapter president, she was writing our chapter's history, which is 24 years of existence. And she had a lot of misinformation in there. And so a couple of us kind of pointed out and said, you know, well, this is wrong, that's wrong, change this to that. I even tracked the changes for her. And rather than her saying thank you, she said, well, I didn't do this, Charlotte did it. And she put it in the email that went to all the members. And I was like, oh God, you know. But that blame thing can be detrimental to the morale in your organization. And it also causes them to look at you in a new light. An employee wants to know that you have their back, you know. Even if they did mess up, well, you can deal with that. Whether that's more instruction. I mean, if it's really serious, then maybe you're talking about conduct issues or disciplinary issues or things of that nature. But the importance is to avoid that blame game. Okay. Let's see. So now I didn't introduce Nelson. And Nelson Hall has been with Avue for about a year. And he's a graduate of Ohio State University, where he majored in English. And I wanted Nelson to participate in the program primarily because the average age of federal workers, as you know, is, what is it, mid-40s or something like that. And, you know, as we go forward, it's more and more important that we engage the new workers, I'll call them, the new and younger workers. So I wanted him to kind of give his perspective a little bit about his experience in the workplace and what he feels he needs.
Well, one thing we want to do, really emphasize that is important for new and young employees is for managers to really make their expectations known right from the get-go. There's nothing scarier as a student just out of college getting a one-line email from your manager saying like, this assignment needs turned over by the end of the day, and then having them unavailable for the rest of the day, and you're just like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, I don't know what to do here. You just get more and more questions, and you end up turning in this project that you really have no idea if you've done correctly or not. So it's really just important just to understand that 24, 25, 26-year-olds haven't been in the workforce very long, and they may not know exactly what you mean when you assign them a project. So just to clearly lay things out, this really takes a lot of stress off them, makes it a lot easier for them, and it helps you get the product that you want. When an employee doesn't know, especially a young employee doesn't know what they're doing, it just creates a lot of stress, and it's just bad news for motivation and morale.
Okay, all right. This is Nelson's first public appearance here. I'm just throwing him out here. Good job. That's right, just a little bit. But thank you for being so encouraging. I think you all are great managers. It's wonderful. That's so good. But it is important that employees know your expectations. We have to remember that they don't know the terminology in many cases. And also, they just have such a totally different work style. I really worried about Nelson from the only because but because Avue is our company places a big value on retired feds, because that's who we do business with primarily. So we want people that have that strong federal HR expertise. So our average age is probably a little bit older. It's probably more like, well, it's probably older than what's in the government, to tell you the truth. But we have that deep expertise. And so then we get Nelson, and then, he's the youngest one there in our DC office. He probably is the youngest one even when we take into Tacoma. Yeah. We do have an office in Tacoma, Washington. So I worried about him because you hear so much about young people working more collaboratively and in teams and groups and that kind of thing. And we're pretty individually focused. But he's done well. He's adapted well. He's been with us now almost a year. But again, somebody has to be cognizant of people like that in terms of making sure they understand what you're expecting of them. You all have heard so much about communication. I mean, communication, but it is so important. It really, really is. And whenever you get information, it needs to be shared. You need to listen to the feedback that your employees give, and you need to communicate with people above you to make sure they understand what you and your team is going through. So that's all very important. If you have people that are superstars and great performers, you need to make sure that's known throughout the organization, particularly to those people that you report to. It's important that you provide the feedback to your employees. I don't know where I'm supposed to be pointing this. I'm just pointing and clicking. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, you can click it too. All right, great. That's good to know. No, so you've been doing this all along? No. And I thought I was doing something. honey. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. So providing regular feedback. Nelson talked about setting expectations, but somebody needs to provide some feedback there along the line. Just to give you a perspective from a private company, when I first started at Avue Technologies, there was like a 90-day probationary period, and I was transitioning from government to private sector and was a little bit nervous about that. And so my 90 days came and went, and finally it had been like maybe 5 months, almost 6 months. And I asked the guy who was my team lead at the time, I said, Bob, nobody's given me my 90-day evaluation. Is everything okay? And he said, well, if you hadn't heard anything, it must mean it's all right. Okay. All right, well, let me settle on down. But I was on pins and needles that whole time, thinking that any day now somebody's going to come in and say, this is not quite working or something. But, got nothing, no feedback at all during that time. So those are things we need to be aware of. Now, the federal government is much more formalized, obviously. They've got performance management systems for days. And if that one doesn't work, by golly, we'll just change it and go to a different one. And if that doesn't work, well, let's try something else, When I was at Commerce, I swear we developed 2 different SES appraisal type systems. And we went from a 5 level, and then we tried to go to I think a pass-fail. Well, they said no, because there's not enough differentiation between levels. Okay, well, we'll go with a 3 level. Well, no. Well, then the headquarters got involved, and we went right back to the 5 level. So, and I was only there 2.5 years, so, but the feedback is the key, whether it's just sitting down, talking as projects are going through. John Barry, I don't often quote him, but, there might be OPM people in here. Okay, good. But one of the things he said that I thought was important was, he says, people like to see that their work has an effect on helping others, on changing the world, on improving themselves. I believe that the federal workforce provides a uniquely powerful opportunity for managers to communicate the impact workers have, because the missions our agencies serve are so vital to many Americans. But that is so true. People want to know that what they do is making a difference. And in many cases, the only way they're going to know that is if you tell them. That's the only way they're going to know it, okay? Recognition, next slide, please. It goes hand in hand with the feedback, and we know we don't have money the way we used to, but whatever happens, it needs to be fair and it needs to be consistent. And I also want to mention discipline at this point. When Nelson and I were putting together the slides, and he kind of asked me, he was like, well, this discipline thing, that doesn't seem to fit with recognition and that kind of thing. And I told him, I said, but there is sort of a relationship in that when you're looking at your people and who's contributing and who's not, if there are people that are causing serious problems in the workplace, they can be very disruptive, and that can contribute to the downfall of everybody else. So to the extent that you're addressing those problems, that gives a very positive impression to those who are conforming and producing. So that's something you want to be aware of. Where you have the discretion to take action, you should do that. You've heard that quote, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So that decisiveness is important. And when your direct reports see that you are up on things, you're aware, and you're willing to address them and take care of them, particularly when we're talking about behavioral issues and that kind of thing, that gives a very, very positive effect on those that are conforming. Next slide, please. So we talked about sharing the goals and that kind of thing, and we talked about how you communicate. Call meetings. I know some people say, oh God, it's like death by meetings, death by PowerPoint. We don't like to meet. I used to have a weekly staff meeting when I was at Commerce, and they would think of 100 reasons not to come to that meeting. But the idea was they did take it seriously in the sense that they knew they better have something to report when it came time to, for me to get to their section. They needed to tell me what had happened since the previous week. And actually, we could get through those meetings pretty efficiently. And so from that perspective, I think it was a good thing. And so if you don't meet, you need to figure out how you're going to get everybody together in some kind of a setting. Let's see. Make time for people. I know your day is busy. That's the next slide. Your day is busy. And I don't care if it's just 1 hour a week that you set aside to say, I'm going to make sure that I talk with everybody that is a direct report. Now, I imagine some of you are probably second, maybe even third level supervisors, and it becomes a little more difficult. You may have to meet with those people that are your direct reports, but then walk through to make sure that everybody else sees you, that they're aware. There's nothing worse than a manager that sits in their office all day long and you never see them. There's also nothing worse than a manager, and I've had them where they say, I'm going to meetings, their whole week is taken up with meetings. And I always wondered, and I was a senior executive, I didn't have that many meetings, but I always wondered, was that an excuse not to deal with the day-to-day issues, is to just keep moving, and you don't have to worry about what's actually going on in your workforce. But it's important that you do that. It's important that you assess where you think your people are and encourage them to address those things, to go and seek out training or other means to take care of their needs. Next slide, please. Most people do want to learn and grow. And we know that there's not a lot of money out there, but there's also a lot of free stuff. And it may take some dealing with your human resources people or others in order to find out what's available at low or no cost. We know travel and training budgets are usually one of the first to get cut. But there are still things that you can take advantage of, even if it's local community college courses, and those kind of things are very inexpensive. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nelson for his additional comment.
Well, it's just really important for young and new employees to kind of have some sense of where they're going. So the first few months I was at Avue, the first month I was just really kind of getting my bearings and focusing on getting into things. But then after that, there wasn't really a sense of where I was going or what my job was going to develop into. After 3 or 4 months, I had a meeting with my manager, and it really helped me because we worked on what skills I could develop in work, what skills I could focus on outside of work, what kind of career path I was looking at. Just things like that that really help you get excited about coming to work and excited about doing your job and focused more on the future. And if you're not working on developing your skills as an employee, it's just becomes really almost unpleasant to have to come in every day and just kind of see yourself doing the same thing over and over again. But since then, things have really just gotten much better, and I can see where even in 3 or 4 years where I'm going to be, and it's just great to have that kind of goals to drive you.
All right, so instead of asking, how do I motivate employees? Maybe the question is, how do I create the work environment in which the individual employee can choose to be motivated and choose to be engaged in the work and activities? Okay. So maybe that's the better question for you. So the challenge is, you've heard all this stuff before. I didn't tell you anything that you probably hadn't heard before about communication, being engaged, motivate yourself, be involved, emotionally relate to people. And there's studies out there, there's research. We're actually on the conclusion page now, so that might be one more, yeah. But it all boils down to managers engaging with their employees in order to get a good result. That's all it boils down to. So whatever it takes to engage, whatever skills you have to employ, whatever environment you have to create within your unit to promote that engagement and that positive morale, that's what you need to undertake. And I forget the GSA guy's name when he mentioned about Melissa, what was her name, from Yahoo. That created, as you can imagine, a lot of stress within that organization for those people that have been telecommuting all that time. And for them to just get a memo and say, oh, guess what, that's changing. Change can be stressful, it's no doubt. And they probably could have done a better job in that letter that went out. And it tried to be positive, but then it basically said, well, we're not getting much done because, y'all are out there, and we don't know what you're doing out there, because the bottom line is that we're losing ground as a company, is pretty much the message that she was conveying to them. And maybe they didn't need to hear that, particularly if they felt like they were being productive. So the communication aspect and how you communicate this change is going to make a difference. So, just to kind of just really, really conclude, I think, because this is the final conclusion. Just remember that being a manager you're the chosen one, so to speak, because they have given you the responsibility not only for your mission, but for the people that are going to help you accomplish that mission. So I hope you'll keep that in mind and take some responsibility for helping people get to the point where even through sequestration and budget cuts and no cost of living increases, they still feel that they're able to contribute and do a good job and that it's recognized and appreciated. Okay. Thank you. I guess I should ask for questions. Do I have a couple of minutes, Todd, just in case? Okay, so if there's anything.
I hope I didn't make this up in my head, because if I did, I'm going to embarrass myself. Did I hear you say something about a Douglas factor application as you were getting started?
Yes, we do. We have a Douglas Factor app in the Avue products that we offer. Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty sweet tool. Yeah, if you need that kind of thing. Yeah, we do. Yeah. But it gives you an opportunity to at least sort of put some scenarios in to see, the possible outcomes and that kind of stuff, maybe even before you talk to HR. Or it might even be good for HR, to do that with you.
One more.
Okay.
Doris and Nelson, I'd like to thank you for coming. My name is Richard Danforth. I work in a shipyard at the northeast corner of the country. In terms of being somewhere between the Ebenezer Scrooge and the Tammy Faye Baker that you had on the screen, and I wonder, Nelson, if you played sports when you were younger, you probably got a blue ribbon every time and nobody kept score, right? It's interesting, your observation about getting an email from your boss and not knowing what it meant. So I grew up in a time when your boss had to give you your task verbally, and you had the ability to say, what the hell do you mean? In terms of that, if he uses the email to give you an assignment, send him an email back and say, I need to meet with you face-to-face so we can discuss the expectations. And then typically, I don't like that word expectation. I'd rather give it to you, here's your assignment, this is how you need to do it, and then ask you what your expectation is of me. I think in terms of how you relate to your supervisor, that's an important part of it. And then as far as blame, I live in a world where our production ends up taking place on a naval asset, and it's a physical workplace that has to be done correctly. So I'm relentless when someone makes a mistake. And I think people of your generation kind of view that as being blamed, but my motivation is to go to you as the employee that made the mistake to make sure that you get the feedback so you will not make that mistake again. So it's nice to know that I can be the Ebenezer and bring the 25-year-old into my office and almost bring them to their knees, discuss why you chose to be a Buckeye instead of a Boston College Eagle, but and have the ability to make you quit, but somewhere in there there's a Tammy Faye, and I just wanted to let you know that I thought your presentation was really good. Very brave of you to be here, and thank you for coming.
Okay, well, we're glad that Nelson's current boss may not quite be like that, but thank you, guys.